Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Ultra in Conversation. And today I'm conversing with Aaron Smith-Levin. Hello, Aaron, a warm welcome to you.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Not at all. Pleased that you could come and talk with me. To begin with, it's well documented that you had an involvement in Scientology. And I've had many conversations in the past with a gentleman called Doug Kramer, who
Mm.
he was similarly involved in Scientology, and Doug died last December rather. And he spent much of his time talking about his escape from Scientology and the impact that it had on him. If I might begin with, how did you get involved in Scientology to begin with?
So I was 4 years old when my mom was introduced to Scientology by a friend of hers. So I was basically raised in Scientology, and I was 12 years old when I started working for the organization full time, and that continued until I was 26, and then I left staff, or the Sea Org as they call it, and then I was a regular Scientologist until 2014 when I was officially declared a suppressive person. So, but the question was, how did I get into it? I was raised in it.
So you had no choice.
Correct.
And when you were involved in it, did you have any exposure at all to people outside of it to draw a comparison between what you were experiencing and what they were experiencing?
Yes, I had a lot of exposure to the outside world.
Okay. You explained that you were involved in it from the age of 4. At what point did you perhaps start to think, hang on a moment, something's not quite right about all of this?
Well, I remember having some thoughts about that even while I was still a true believer. I mean, two examples, two anecdotes that come to mind immediately is I remember being in the third grade, sitting in a circle with the students in the front of the class, and for some reason, everybody was going around talking about what their parents did for work, and I just remember being terrified that that the class wouldn't end before it got to me.
Mm.
I was very aware that I was uncomfortable with what I knew of what my mom did, that she either worked at the Dianetics Center or the Church of Scientology. And all I knew is that I was kind of humiliated to have to talk about this. So, that's that for me. That was 8 years old, 9 years old at the most. That would have been 8 years old when I started the third grade, 9 years old when I finished. So that's just an anecdote from my younger years.
Yeah,
Later,
help me. Sorry to cut across you, Aaron. Help me understand why would you find that humiliating?
I don't even know. I think I just knew that it was so different than normal society. And it was also something that even at that young age, I wasn't proud of. Like, it's not like I was like, I can't wait to talk about how my mom is saving the world. Like you might think some young child has this naive idea, these naive and
Yes.
exaggerated ideas of the importance of what their parents do. No, I remember being embarrassed by it. I can't even tell you why. I don't know why.
Okay. You were about to give another example.
So fast forward to, I guess I'm probably 25 years old in this anecdote. I'm working for the C organization, which is the innermost core of Scientology staff. Those are the people who sign the billion-year contracts. Your entire life is Scientology. You don't have a life outside of Scientology. And I had an executive role in Los Angeles overseeing the training of Scientology auditors. And I remember one day, I was waiting for the course rooms to get out for lunch because I was going to have to address all of the student body and make some sort of an announcement. And I remember thinking to myself, I said, in my entire life, I've never actually been a public Scientologist, someone who pays money to do the courses and get the auditing. I've always been a staff member. It's always been my job to deliver Scientology to paid public. And I said, if I wasn't here in the Sea Org and I had the freedom to do what I wanted, would I ever pay my hard-earned money and spend my valuable time to come into this building, to sit down in a seat in one of these course rooms, to study one of these courses under the supervision of a course supervisor? And I thought to myself, under no circumstances would I ever spend $1 or spend even 1 minute doing the things that these people are doing, that it's my job to deliver to them. And and you might think, oh my God, that must have been a waking up moment for you. You must have left very shortly afterwards. And I would say, no, I was in for many, many more years after that. So I guess,
that took place. So that moment of you thinking, no way would I pay for this gig, was what, when you were 25, you say?
yes,
Yeah. Okay. And you carried on being involved in the organization for some time afterwards.
for another 9 years. Yeah.
Another 9 years. I thought you said earlier on you left when you were 26.
I left the C organization when I was 26, but I
I
continued
see.
to be in Scientology until 2014.
I understand. Right. Okay. And to help people who perhaps won't understand the distinction, you've talked about the Sea Org being sort of the inner sanctum aspect, the staff aspect of it. What then changes when you leave that aspect of it but remain a Scientologist for the time period that passed after that?
So if you leave staff and the Sea Org, you basically become a public Scientologist.
Okay.
But because I had never willingly joined Scientology in the first place, I might have technically been designated as a public, but I never felt like I was a public. I was never someone who was like willingly participating in Scientology. I was a public by virtue of no longer being a staff member and by virtue of the fact that I was not expelled from Scientology at this point. So at that point, being a public is all you can be. That's the only thing that
I understand.
that's what it is.
So in essence, rather than sort of volunteer to be that, you just simply shifted into that position because you were no longer staff.
That's right. If you're a
Yeah.
Scientologist and you're not on staff, you are by default called a public.
Okay. And when you hold that position of being a public Scientologist, are you treated any differently by the organization than compared to when you were staff?
Yes, you are. In a weird way, you're treated better because you are the potential source of donations to Scientology. So the public Scientologists are the ones who pay Scientology for the privilege of participating. It's the staff members who are working essentially for free to deliver to the public. So in a way, the public are treated better. However, public who used to be on staff are treated worse. You're sort of treated like, you used to be one of us, but now you're one of them.
So you're a bit of a pariah, are you?
A little bit, yes.
Yeah, sure. Okay. And then you departed from Scientology. What happened there?
That's a bit of a longer story that I'll try to make relatively short. So I leave the C organization in 2006. A few years later, but because I'm a public Scientologist now, I still exist in the Scientology ecosystem. Okay.
Yes.
So I hold a number of jobs for various companies run by Scientologists. In 2009, 3 years after I leave the Sea Org, the Tampa Bay Times runs a series of articles about former high-level Scientology managers who have not only left the Sea organization, but they've left Scientology altogether. And they are speaking out and telling some of the most fantastic tales of abuse and torture happening at Scientology's international management base in California under David Miscavige. That for me is when I say that was the first crack. That was really the first crack in the dam as far as me seriously questioning things. Those earlier anecdotes wasn't even me seriously questioning things. Those were more like just some cognitive dissonance. But when I started seeing, because these former managers were famous personalities in Scientology. You know, these are people all Scientologists knew. These are people who at Scientology's annual events would be up on stage addressing all Scientologists in the world. And the fact that these people, who themselves had mostly been born and raised in Scientology, many of them had personally known and worked with L. Ron Hubbard, were actually out of Scientology. It made me think, wow, that means that what they know of Scientology, what they knew of L. Ron Hubbard, what they know of Scientology's confidential levels, clearly that was not important or valuable enough to these folks to allow them to continue to stay in Scientology, regardless of the abuse, regardless of any mistreatment or disrespect. And that's what started to make me go, wow, maybe they know something about these upper levels that I don't know. Because I never did the upper levels when I was in Scientology. I never learned all the secret confidential stuff that most of the world knows about now.
Okay. What happened next?
Oh, that's right. Sorry. Okay. So then, a lot of these high level executives start leaving, and Scientologists are forbidden from having any contact with these people. So now my mom at this point was still a Scientologist, and she and I both started secretly getting in touch with these people. My mom then started spreading around some of the information from these people to other Scientologists. And she got in trouble for that and got expelled from Scientology. Now, Scientology has a policy called disconnection. You have to sever all ties with anyone who's expelled from Scientology. So I was pressured to cut all ties with my mother. And for a couple years, I pretended like I had, but I hadn't really. And
Why did
eventually,
you, sorry to cut across you, Aaron. Why, first of all, how did that make you feel, the fact that you were being told that you had to cut ties with your mother?
It was sort of a potentially life destroying situation I was being put into. I had a very close relationship with my mom.
Yeah.
And I was basically being forced to choose between my mom and everyone else I've known in my life.
Yeah.
Pretty much. And at this point, I myself was already personally disaffected because, I'm being exposed to all this information from these former high level managers. And I sort of had decided that I was comfortable continuing to remain in the organization and kind of working as somewhat of a spy for these former Scientology managers. I was somewhat comfortable living in both worlds, and I was dedicated to doing that. Okay. So for 2 years, I basically just lied to everyone about being disconnected from my mom. Scientology has a snitching culture, an encouraged and enforced snitching culture amongst its members.
Yep.
And I would get more and more careless in how I hid my connection to my mother. So the organization kept getting reports from various people about all the indicators I was still in touch with my mom. Eventually, they knew I was just going to keep lying to them about this. So they kicked me out officially in 2014. And so then they go to my wife and they say, you've got to divorce your husband or you're going to get kicked out. And she goes, well, that's not going to work for me. So they kick her out.
And was it the case, therefore, the basis on which they kicked you out was because you were lying about your involvement with your mother?
They didn't. Well, they would argue they kicked me out for being connected to her, not for lying about it.
Okay, so you
it's the connection that's the problem.
I see. So because you maintained a connection with your mother, which was against what had been prescribed, and that ultimately you kept on doing that, that became the grounds for you to be expelled yourself.
That's right. And plus, they started to suspect that I too was secretly in touch with some of these former high-level managers.
Yeah. Okay. And so you were about to say that this then impacted upon your marriage.
Well, they attempted to. So they go to my wife. They say, you have to divorce your husband or you're going to get kicked out. And she goes, well, that's not going to work for me. So they kick her out. So then they go to her parents and they say, well, you've got to disconnect from your daughter and your son-in-law and your 3 granddaughters or you're going to be kicked out. Well, my wife's parents had 3 other children who all have children of their own who are all Scientologists. And so then my wife's folks and brother and sisters disconnected from her. And that was in 2014. And that's the last she's seen or heard from any of them.
So your wife has had no contact with her family.
Yeah.
Her parents, her siblings since 2014.
Correct.
And that's as a consequence of them still staying under the control of Scientology.
That's right.
I see. If you were to describe how you feel about Scientology, what would you describe it as?
How I feel about them or what I feel they are?
How you feel about them. Given the fact that, let's, a quick summary here, you had no choice but to be in this organization. You were subjected to what it wanted. It essentially led to you moving from being Sea Org to becoming a public Scientologist, that you had your doubts about it. And then you were told that you had to disconnect with your mother after her expulsion. You were then expelled, which then resulted in them suggesting that your wife had to disconnect from you. She wouldn't do that. And it's essentially resulted, from what you've explained there, as causing your wife and you to have nothing to do with your wife's family since. Most people would think, well, that's a pretty shocking state of affairs, I'd imagine.
Yeah. I describe Scientology as a family destroying human trafficking cult.
Okay. Now, it's interesting you mentioned about a cult, and it's often something it's referenced as. And many cult leaders are narcissists because of their need to control people and the benefits that that control provides for them. Is narcissism something that you have a familiarity with?
I have read books about it.
Yeah.
I got to tell you, as much as I feel I've read and as much information as I feel I've been exposed to about it, it's very hard for me to retain a clear understanding and definition of narcissism or sociopathy or psychopathy, if that's a word, and what the distinction is and where the lines are drawn and all this kind of stuff.
Sure,
So,
it's okay.
on the one,
there's not going to be an examination about it. So,
I mean, I've read a lot. I've read a lot on the subject, and a lot of it, to me, it's hard to know how to make really good sense of it all.
Okay. Given that you've read a lot about it, how much of that do you recognize in what you experienced within Scientology?
Yes, I mean, I definitely feel that. I mean, I definitely feel that L. Ron Hubbard was either a narcissist or a sociopath or whatever. Like what I read of narcissism, I go, yes, that's L. Ron Hubbard. I saw a very casual definition yesterday of narcissism, of like an intense desire, need to be a very special and better than everyone. And you go, well, geez, that could describe almost anyone, but taken to a certain extent. I mean, in some extent, the entire premise of Scientology is something that sort of promotes narcissism in an individual, in my opinion. Like the message of Scientology is essentially, you are a god, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Like Scientology does not believe in a supreme being. It believes that we are all ourselves sort of innately a supreme being.
Yeah.
We are the creators of the universe, creators of the physical universe. We are immortal. We are all powerful. We are godlike. We have fallen from that state to live on this prison planet and be stuck in these prison bodies. And that with enough Scientology auditing, you can regain your native spiritual abilities that are truly godlike and independent of the physical universe. Does that sound like something that would promote narcissism? To me, it does.
Well, it's certainly a view that would probably be espoused by a narcissist by way of their magical thinking, to believe that they are so special, that that's what they are. And if you're subjected to that kind of environment, coupled with having a genetic predisposition towards narcissism, it would create narcissists. It's similar to how, for instance, in royalty, invariably all those years ago, the person that got to the top of the tree and pulled a land together and said, I'm the king of this country, now you better do as I say, more often than not would be a narcissist, because laying their hands on that power enabled them to get to what's called the prime aims. So they could control people. They would get fuel from people's reactions. They'd get character traits and residual benefits. So becoming king would be very attractive to a narcissist. And arguably, a narcissist would be best equipped to get themselves in that position. And then thereafter, one of the things that was necessary, of course, was to create an heir, a male heir. And therefore, if father was the king and he was a narcissist, there was a good chance that he would pass that genetic predisposition on to his son. And then what environment is his son brought up in? Well, you're going to be the king. So there are people bowing and scraping to him from as early as he can remember, perhaps almost as early as like when you were 4 years old, that the individual finds himself, that he can just remember that that's how people have always treated him. And that environment would cultivate, alongside that genetic predisposition, the creation of another narcissist. And then he goes on to have a child, and he passes the genetic predisposition on, and his son, his firstborn, is treated in a similar fashion. And that's why you will see narcissist after narcissist after narcissist appearing within these family trees of royal houses. So it follows also that in an environment whereby people are attracted to Scientology in the first place, it may well appeal to certain narcissists to enter that ecosystem because of what it provides them. And then, of course, they cultivate more themselves. Do you think you obviously dealt with many other people that were Scientologists in the couple of decades that you were involved in it? Probably at the time you didn't necessarily look at them and think, oh, I think this person's a narcissist. But afterwards, given the fact that you've read a lot about it, do you look back and think, oh, I think that person was, and that person was, and they definitely were?
A select few, yes. A select
Okay.
few, yes. I don't, by and large, see Scientologists in general that way.
No.
Yeah.
And of the ones
Well,
that you recognized in that, what were their behaviors that perhaps stood out to you that would tell you, oh yeah, now I know a bit more about narcissism. I very much think that person probably was a narcissist. What did you see in their behaviors?
the personality traits that I that jump out to me, that cause me to have those thoughts about those people, is they have this very overinflated idea of their own importance, their own worth, and their own value. They also have very thin skin and see almost any mild thing as a very serious criticism and a threat, and also very much sort of trying to keep anyone else from approaching what might be perceived as being their peer. Like they're constantly kind of putting people down in subtle or not so subtle ways. Where it's not it's not very comfortable to be around them. You don't feel good being around them. You feel sort
Mm-hmm.
of slightly put down or manipulated or controlled or managed or something. And the help doesn't feel genuine and sincere from these folks. It feels like you're going to owe them something in return if they do anything for you. That kind of stuff. But again, I make these descriptions without any regard for what the clinical criteria might be for narcissism.
I was understood. I know that you're not an expert. I'm just interested in your experience and your perception of it. So it's quite all right. You don't need to caveat it in that manner. Now, after you were expelled from the Scientology organization, I understand you had some involvement in something called the Aftermath Foundation.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. Well, I mean, Luis Garcia, my good friend Luis Garcia was the creator and founder. It was his idea to create the Aftermath Foundation. He was the president and the chairman. I was the vice president. And
Okay. There'll be many people
yeah.
listening who don't know what that is. So might you spend a few moments expanding on what that foundation does or did?
Sure. It's a nonprofit organization that just exists to help people who are leaving Scientology and are suffering the effects of Scientology's disconnection and fair game policies. And so even though Luis was the president, I, as the vice president, was handling the day-to-day operations of the foundation. And more recently, I created the SPTV Foundation to do the exact same thing.
Okay. Now, you've got a YouTube channel growing up in Scientology.
Mm-hmm.
Is that what you're referencing with the SPTV? Or is that something separate?
Well, I mean, growing up in Scientology is the name of my YouTube channel.
Yep.
SPTV has come to refer to just former Scientologists in general who are, speaking their truths and telling their stories on
I
YouTube.
understand. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. What drove you then to create your YouTube channel?
At the time, it just sort of dawned on me that people who were telling the stories of former Scientologists, or people who were interviewing former Scientologists, or people who were producing shows about former Scientologists, were all themselves not Scientologists. And I thought the conversation and the information that was elicited might be a bit different, perhaps more interesting, if it was being done by a fellow former Scientologist. And so in the beginning, the idea was just for me to just interview other people, other former Scientologists, and because it just simply wasn't being done. There wasn't anywhere where a former Scientologist was asking the questions of other former Scientologists.
So it's a hunter turned gamekeeper approach. Accordingly, you were doing that because you've got inside knowledge, you've been there, so you're an expert on it. So that makes perfect sense as to why you would ask the questions and why you would have people also who've escaped Scientology on it. But was there a wider aim behind the YouTube channel? Was it just to satisfy? It was just to satisfy an itch for you to say to be able to talk to these people about the experiences, like a fireside chat, or were you wanting to get a message out there?
So it wasn't really getting a message out there. Like it wasn't like a fine-tuned goal. I think what it was is it occurred to me that for those conversations to be maximally interesting to other Scientologists or other former Scientologists, it would be more interesting if it was a conversation between two former Scientologists. In other words, they would know the questions to ask that would be most interesting to other former Scientologists, as opposed to the questions that somebody would ask who's never been in Scientology are just a completely different type of questions. And so in the beginning, it was my goal to create content that was more geared to be interesting to other people who were either still in Scientology or perhaps themselves were recently out of Scientology. That was the goal. It wasn't even to appeal to as wide of an audience as possible. It was to appeal to other Scientologists or former Scientologists. But now the channel has grown where my goal is to appeal to as many people as possible.
Okay, and so the goal's changed, and that can often be the case. Why do you want to appeal to as many people as possible to sort of take it beyond the environs of people who've been involved in Scientology?
I think in the beginning, it just didn't occur to me that anybody outside of the sphere of Scientologists, former Scientologists, would even care about the conversations I was interested in having with people. But then what happened is Leah Remini did her television show, Scientology in the Aftermath. And that show ran for 3 seasons. I was one of the guests on the first season. And I created a Facebook group for supporters of the TV show. And the Facebook group itself grew to about 40,000 people. And then I started doing more content on my channel. And now that the world was becoming more and more conscious of the plights of people who were leaving Scientology, I was just like, oh, wow. Like people who've never had anything to do with Scientology are, for their own reasons, many times very interested in these stories because there's something about these stories that resonates with them, whether they've dealt with their own high control groups or had other cults, or even just, certain religious upbringings, or, narcissistic relationships, abusive relationships. There's common threads in all these things that makes stories of former Scientologists interesting to a surprisingly large number of people. And then it started to occur to me that one of the biggest ways to give a big middle finger to David Miscavige, the leader of Scientology, was to try and be as prolific as possible just on the subject of Scientology on the internet. It almost seems a little reactionary, if not childish, to be like, I'm going to do this just because you can't stop me.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. You were involved in it for more years than you've been outside of it, yes?
Correct.
Okay. And it naturally imposed a particular worldview on you from a very young and impressionable age. How much has Scientology shaped your worldview?
When we say worldview, do we just mean like the nature of existence?
Well, how you look at the world. You spoke earlier on about, in essence, in a critical fashion, describing how you're taught, in effect, to see yourself as your own God, and you recognize that as, to put it mildly, inappropriate as a way to see oneself. So you recognize that, but you've been exposed to a certain mindset for a long time, and in the way that children often have their views shaped by their parents because that's who they're exposed to, that you have been exposed to an organization which, in essence, its very existence is about controlling you, causing you to behave in a particular way, to do what that organization wants to protect its interests, and to cause you to look at people in a particular way. That strikes me as a fairly significant force that's been applied against you. And therefore, do you ever examine yourself and think, Has this shaped my worldview? Do I see the world this way because of them? Have I thrown off the shackles of it? I'm
Yeah.
interested to understand the extent to which you feel that it's caused you to see the world in a particular way, that maybe you fight against it, that it still has an impact on you.
Yeah, it's a good question. And if I'm being honest, it might not be totally apparent to me the ways in which Scientology has or still does shape my worldview, but I'll give this a shot.
Sure.
So there's the negative aspect of the potentially negative aspect of making someone believe that they are themselves essentially a god, if that's taken to an absurd degree. There's a positive aspect in putting someone in a frame of mind where they feel that anything in their life that is a problem for them, there is something effective they can do about it, no matter what. And it's funny because all the things I'm going to say sound like positive takeaways. So just work with, bear with me on this.
Certainly.
Because honestly, I consider myself to have pretty strong determination, pretty good confidence, pretty good persistence. I'm very positive, and I'm proactive on things. And because the only path that I traveled was Scientology, it's very hard for me to not think that Scientology gets the credit for those aspects of myself that I think are positive. Because I go, well, to who else would the credit go? I don't.
Yeah.
And if I'm sitting here and I go, well, it's just genetic, then it sounds like I'm just patting myself on the back or something. I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like the positive aspects that there are to be taken from Scientology, I feel like I have taken from Scientology. And I'm not sure I'm capable of being entirely aware of the negative aspects that I've still taken.
Mm-hmm.
Or that I have taken away from them and continue to carry with me. I feel like my detractors are probably more aware of those things. I mean, for example, my detractors very casually call me a narcissist, a malignant narcissist, nonetheless. And so I would maybe ask you, how would I know if I were one?
Well, most narcissists don't know that they are.
Mm.
So the difficulty that you would face is it's actually quite simple. There are a number of narcissists that know that they are, therefore they never need to ask the question because they know what they are. They might not necessarily think, oh, I am a narcissist, but they will recognize the behaviors in themselves that cause them to behave in a different way, which ultimately, so by way of example, I didn't wake up one day and think, oh, I'm a narcissist. It was as a consequence of something that an ex-girlfriend had said. But I knew that I was different in numerous ways. So I always knew that my behaviors were different to that of other individuals. So I just didn't have a label for it. But I had that awareness. But the vast majority of narcissists don't know what they are. So what would happen is, for example, if you are one and you're an unaware one, your narcissism simply won't let you process the suggestion that you are one. It's like a bit of wiring has been taken out of your brain, so you can't process it. It's like saying to a blind person, describe that over there, and they go, describe what? Because they can't see it. So the narcissism for many narcissists blinds them to what they are because it's a self-defense mechanism. They're not allowed, in effect, to know what they are, because if they did, it wouldn't function properly. It wouldn't be seamless. It wouldn't be instantaneous. It wouldn't be instinctive. So if you are one, no matter how much evidence would be put to you, you would be rejecting it because your narcissism would in fact be rejecting it on your behalf. Now, everybody has narcissistic traits. That's something different. So you'll have vanity, you'll have pride, you'll have resentment, and other narcissistic traits. And many of those things can function in a healthy way when they're ensconced within empathic traits. But if you were a narcissist, you would need control, you'd need fuel, but you wouldn't recognize that. Your narcissism would always suggest it's something else. So you've mentioned your detractors, and you're obviously familiar that there are a number of them. You're something of a public figure. So, you have your YouTube channel and you've given various interviews and you've articulated various views about differing topics is entirely your right. But by being in the public eye, that means you attract commentary about you, and you've taken some considerable criticism from certain quarters. What's your view of those criticisms that have been made about you?
My view of it. I feel the need to separate my view of the criticism itself from my view of the people making the criticism. Because having criticisms of someone or people having criticisms of me is expected and understandable. But people feeling the need to go on some sort of a campaign to try and destroy a person or discredit a person or get people to disavow a person seems to me to be something more than just having honest, criticisms of someone.
Is that how it feels to you, that there are people embarking on a campaign to destroy you?
Oh, I mean, I know that's true. I'm not saying that's true of everyone who criticizes me. I'm saying there's absolutely a campaign of that.
You believe that there are people whose stated aim is to destroy you.
Oh, I don't believe it. I know it.
How do you know that?
Because it's what they say.
Who's they?
People. Well, I mean, I'm not going to give them the credit of naming them, but.
Okay, are they people that you've met?
No.
Okay, so they're strangers on the internet.
Exactly.
Okay. And what is the evidence that supports your assertion that they wish to destroy you?
No, it's what they say. I'm not saying I infer that from what they say. I'm saying that is what they say. Their goal is
there
to
are people
cause me.
There are people who've gone on a YouTube channel, for example, and have said, "I want to destroy Aaron Smith-Levin."
They want to lose me, my audience, lose me any support, deplatform me, get me out of the movement. So exposing Scientology abuse.
And they've stated those aims. They want to deplatform you. They want you out.
Correct.
Yeah. Why is it they want to do that?
Well, that's what I mean. I probably don't really know exactly. But
why do you think they want to do that then?
Oh, they think I'm horribly abusive of other former Scientologists and try to keep everyone else down so that I'm the king of the hill and the top of the pile, and only my voice and the voices of people who are loyal to me and friendly to me are heard. And it almost cracks me up because it's the exact opposite of everything I've tried to do on YouTube. Like the moment I found success, the first thing I tried to do was to get as much people to share in the success that I was having. So, and to be fair, my comments are directed at only a select few. You know what I mean? So like if someone has a problem, if I'm too bombastic, if I'm too opinionated, if I'm too negative, if I take shots at people that I don't like, I see those criticisms and I go, well, those are fair criticisms. Those are fair criticisms. But when I see people going on a campaign, it tends to put me in a frame of mind where I no longer put a lot of value in what those people have to say. Because I go, well, there are certain people who, no matter what you do, they criticize. And those people, I would put the people who have sort of announced that they're in a campaign into that category. Like, if I were to do something good today, it would be like, why did it take him so long? If I were to do another thing good, it would be because it was for some underhanded motive. If someone is showing loyalty to me publicly, it's because I'm manipulating them and controlling them. And so I guess when you ask me about my thoughts and reactions to criticism, that's the type of criticism that immediately comes to mind. I don't feel like I'm someone who has a problem with criticism. Like I don't, I enjoy, at least that's what I tell myself. I enjoy getting feedback that I think is helpful and constructive. I don't,
But you don't like people suggesting that they're going to destroy you, though.
No, I certainly don't like that.
No. What do you think is the driver for that, Aaron? That given that you don't recognize that there's any basis for seeking to deplatform you or to cause you to lose your audience, you reject that out of hand. Why then do you think that they see you as so problematic? What's the driver behind that?
In order to answer that question, I would have to be incredibly insulting and demeaning of those people, which I think is not productive. Because that's sort of where I go as an answer. Like, I think to be an anonymous person on the internet, who's
Mhm.
dedicating, I don't know, 6, 8, 10, 12 hours a day to trying to hate on and destroy someone you don't know in real life, and
Mhm.
who is actively working to expose a family destroying human trafficking cult. Like let's take this. If someone goes, this is what I'll see some of these people pretend to do. Oh my God, I used to be such a fan, but
Mhm.
then he did X, Y, and Z, and now, like, you go, so wait, those are the two options. You went from being a fan and loving me to trying to destroy me. Like, I can think of a lot of people I used to be fans of, and when I stopped being their fan, I just stopped watching their stuff. I didn't dedicate myself to trying to destroy them on the internet. And so, some of these people that come to mind when I'm making the statements that I am, they
Yes.
claim that because they used to support me and they no longer do, they now have to basically make up for that by trying to tear me down. And I just go, that explanation just doesn't make sense for me. If you don't like me anymore, move on. But when you then transition to now you're trying to actually hurt me, hurt my family, hurt people who are loyal to me, I just don't put any value in criticism that comes from that type of individual. Does that seem fair?
That's naturally your view of their behavior and one that is personal to you. I'm interested to see if you might be able to hit upon what might be their driver to go against you. You you fairly observed. If that were me, and I essentially fell out of love with somebody that I watched on the internet or such, I would just move on. So your reaction is that, but that isn't theirs. They're
Yeah.
different for some reason. So I wonder if you've ever sort of thought to yourself, if it were me, I'd just move on. So why is it? Why is it that they seem to be intent on destroying what I've built up? Is it
I
envy?
do
Or
think
is it
it
do
makes
they
them
think
feel
they're on a moral
important.
makes them feel important?
I don't think
Okay.
it's envy, because I think envy would imply they were trying to accomplish the same thing I'm accomplished, that they were trying to, or that they wished they could accomplish what I've accomplished. And a lot of these people aren't even in the public sphere, so I don't think that's what motivates them.
Okay.
I think it makes them feel important to anoint me the bad guy, and it makes them the Batman to try to be uh, taking me down in some way. But I realize when I say that, it sounds like I'm just being dismissive and critical. I just don't have another explanation for it. I think it makes them feel like they are engaged in something important. And honestly, being kind of being the biggest anti-Scientology, former Scientologist channel out there, it is natural that, you know, if someone was going to have sights set on them, it would likely be me. And I just think that there's, 2 or 3, maybe 5 people who just feel very, very important, um, trying to quote unquote expose the anti-Scientology movement. And I don't know.
Do you think
They
they
sure are
have ties?
dedicated.
Yeah. Do you think they have ties to Scientology?
The ones I'm thinking of, I will say, I don't think that they do. But I do think that they are perhaps unaware of the ways in which Scientology agents are very much feeding them and stirring them up and validating them and encouraging them and cheering them on. And they think that's natural, organic support that they're receiving, but it is almost certainly from Scientology agents. And perhaps that's a part of what makes them feel important, is that they are, they feel like they're getting this grassroots support, but really they're just being fed by provocateurs.
So there's somebody making the bullets and they're firing them at you.
Exactly.
Okay. And in terms of dealing
So,
with these individuals, what's your strategy?
oh, I completely ignore them. 100% ignore them. Yeah. I have fallen into the trap on my channel of calling them out collectively every now
Mhm.
and then, but honestly, that makes them feel even more important, and it encourages them to continue. So I have just adopted a new policy the last several months of 100% completely ignoring them.
I see. And has that proven to be successful?
I do feel that it has been, if only, for me personally. but because it really does make them feel, it fuels that feeling of importance to have me acknowledging and recognizing them in my videos that are getting tens of thousands of views. Oh my God, look, we've created an effect on him. We're having an impact. We're forcing him to respond to us. We're getting under his skin. And so by, completely ignoring them, it just sucks all the oxygen out of that fire. Now I'm mentioning it in this interview, so maybe it'll fuel it up a little bit. But on my channel, at least, my rule is completely ignore, no engagement.
I understand. You have had repeated and sustained criticisms leveled at you. I'd just be interested to know your response to some of them, if I may put them to you. So
Sure.
It's been suggested that you've had numerous affairs outside of your marriage. What do you say to that?
Well, my wife and I have been separated since 2019, which was our business and no one else's business. So, I have had many relationships over the last 5 years, but that was never supposed to be anyone's business, but me and my wife's business. And so that's, I had to go public.
But prior to your separation, there were no affairs?
No.
Okay. And so the people that prior to that who've gone on social media and claimed that they've had an intimate relationship with you, what did you say to that?
No one's ever made that claim prior to that.
There's not been anybody prior to 2019 who's suggested they were in an intimate relationship with you?
Correct.
Okay. You admitted that you spied on the Church of Scientology.
Well, spying just means sharing information with, I don't mean snooping into offices and files. I just mean sharing information about what's going on in the Scientology world.
Well, earlier on you did say I was living as a spy.
I was casually saying that.
Right, okay.
Like when I say spying, not going into offices or whatever. I just mean, the Scientology world tends to talk to itself. So sharing information about the goings on within the Scientology world with people who are outside of it, like Marty Rathbun and Mike Rinder and stuff like that. I don't regret using the word spy. I just want to make clear what I was talking about.
Right, okay. So not in the sense of Kim Philby or such like in Soviet Russia.
No, right.
Okay. It was suggested that you stole client and proprietary information in establishing a rival investment business. What's your reaction to that?
I've never heard that allegation. What does that mean?
It is on the face of it that you were at a business and then you took client information and proprietary information elsewhere.
I've never seen that accusation anywhere. That would be totally false.
Okay. And
that might be an example. That might be an example of something. When we were talking about the critics a moment ago.
Yeah.
I have seen these people go online and make lengthy and extensive and detailed blog posts stating things and claiming to know things for an absolute fact that is just 100% manufactured and invented, whether they know it or not, meaning whether they think they've researched something and they think they found the truth, but what they think they found isn't anywhere close to the truth. Like what you just said is kind of an example of something that one of those people might have actually said. So you might have actually found somewhere on the internet that actually said that, but that person has not the slightest clue what they're talking about.
Understood. Okay. Similarly, it was suggested that you were involved in forming a research report that was described as being premised on false and fabricated information when you were a consultant for a hedge fund manager who was accused of market manipulation of Herbalife shares.
Oh, the Herbalife Research Project. I'm very proud of that work. Yes. So it's hard to know whether, I believe it was Herbalife's own attorneys, though, that accused me of.
It was, yes.
Right. Well, right. But it's one of those things where you're like, of course, that's what they would say. When in reality, I very publicly gave a presentation with hedge fund manager Bill Ackman of Pershing Square Capital. Very publicly gave an investor presentation to him about my findings into Herbalife after extensive research in China and elsewhere. And Herbalife paid, was it $200 million in fines for violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act. all of that information was revealed specifically and only because of the research that I did and exposed. So, of course, that's what Herbalife would say. But and you know what? On the website that Scientology has created about me to try and destroy me, I believe there's a section of that website dedicated to some of the claims and accusations made by Herbalife's attorneys. And even many of those claims are completely false. I think there's a claim that I was somehow wrapped up in an FBI investigation into market manipulation. I mean, it's just a false statement. I've never been contacted by law enforcement with respect to anything to do with the Herbalife project. I've never spoken with the FBI. I've never received a documents request. I've never so much has received an email, a text message, or a phone call from any government agency whatsoever with relating to anything to do with the Herbalife project.
So there's a website that exists that's been created by Scientology to defame you.
Yes. It's actually aaronsmithlevin.com is a website created by the Church of Scientology.
How long has that been around?
That website went live the very night my episode aired of the Scientology and the Aftermath television program. So it's been up for a number of years now, 5 or 6 years. I lose track of when when that program actually aired.
That was a retaliatory act against what you were talking about.
That's right. And actually, every single person who appeared in that TV show had a website put up by them with similar over-the-top accusations by the Church of Scientology.
Do you know what else is on that website?
Oh, I've pretty much seen everything on that website. My wife's family members have done videos. Some of my former associates in the Sea organization have done videos about what a horrible, horrible, terrible person I am. Mm-hmm. And yeah, I'm familiar with it.
Yeah. So
I actually encourage people in my videos to go look at it, just if only to serve as an example of what this so-called religious organization will do and the lengths that they will go to try and defame critics.
But given what's stated about you, and I understand that you refute it all and reject it, that somebody who doesn't know you, Aaron, could well look at that website and think, goodness me, he's a real piece of work, isn't he?
It's true. It's very true. Fortunately, nobody gives a damn about what the Church of Scientology has to say about everyone or about anyone. Scientology has kind of done us all a favor where every single person who speaks out about them gets the exact same treatment. Mm-hmm. And so it just becomes like, to the best of my knowledge, that website has never done me any harm, which is why.
Does the website make it clear that it's funded by the Church of Scientology, or is it silent about that? I'd imagine it'd be silent about it, wouldn't it?
You would think so. At the very bottom of the website, it says created by the Church of Scientology, copyright 2024.
Right. Okay. And so, though I presume not many people would really be scrolling all the way down to look at who the copyright belongs to. They'd be more like, goodness me, look at the allegations against this fellow. He did this, he did that, etc.
But isn't it? But let me ask you this: like, I think that because Scientology does a pretty good job at creating high quality professional audio video content.
Yeah.
Wouldn't it strike anyone as a little strange that any individual would have such an expensive, highly produced website dedicated solely to telling the world what a total piece of shit they are? Like, I don't know. I guess I have always assumed that it's always very obvious to anyone who goes to this website.
I suppose the contrary argument to that, Aaron, is that you might be such a despicable shit that people need to think that it's worthwhile spending the money to tell the world that you are such a despicable shit.
I think that's what Scientology hopes. But luckily, when you Google me, it's also very easy to see that I'm a pretty outspoken critic of Scientology. So then when you go, holy shit, there's a whole website dedicated to destroying him. I guess everything they say about Scientology is true.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'll be honest, that website doesn't cause me an ounce of stress.
There is a risk for you, though, that there will be people who look at that and think it's all true. And they won't factor in the aspect of Scientology, and that besmirches your reputation. It paints you in a very dim light indeed. Is it the case you think, well, I don't care for the people that form that view, I just dismiss them, and I rely on everybody else seeing through it? What's your stance to it?
Not really. My stance to it is if you're Googling me to begin with, then you probably already have an idea of who I am. And that website is just going to be interesting to you. Like, why would nobody would really be Googling me by name
Hmm.
unless they've already heard about me or know about me. And so it's actually never even occurred to me that that website has a negative effect on me. I mention the website all the time in my videos. I encourage people to go look at it.
Well, what about the situation now? You meet a young lady and you go on a couple of dates and she knows your name, and many people do, don't they? They punch somebody's name in to see just what they know about them, and this pops up.
Oh,
She might be pretty horrified, thinking, "Oh, I quite liked him," and now, goodness me, I didn't realize he'd done all of this.
that's true. Fortunately, telling people about my Scientology past is one of the first things I usually explain about myself.
Yes.
Um, you know what I mean? So it's almost like I don't diminish the effect that a website like that could potentially have on a person. I just feel that the phrase that I've liked to use is Scientology has created a Scientology, a fair game proof resistant, a fair game resistant strain of virus
Hmm.
by, raising a whole generation of young Scientology soldiers who know exactly how and why they do what they do, how they do what they do, and why. And now we're on the outside and we're impervious to their tactics, and it just doesn't work. Like any new stuff they try to sling at me, I just do videos about it. So it's like I do videos about it, and I highlight what they do and what they say as evidence of their tactics of destroying and fair gaming and trying to delegitimize and deplatform their critics. And so it's almost like it can't affect me. But I know that a lot of what they do for psychological warfare. They want to get under your skin. They want you to be afraid. They want you to be scared and nervous. They don't as much care about getting people to turn against you. They care about getting you scared enough to back off. And I guess I've just decided that um, I've kind of adopted the role of showing everyone that it doesn't work.
Hmm.
So, I kind of a long-winded answer to a simple question, but I feel like if anyone's already looking me up, then they already know who I am, and that's all.
I understand. So a website's been created essentially defaming you, and your position on it is, well, if it's there, if you're going to believe it, you're going to believe it. I'm not going to let it affect me.
Yeah, and
Mhm.
it's also 95% untrue. Um, Now, of course, maybe anybody could say that, but I guess that's part of what makes me like not really care. You're like, well, geez, anybody can say anything on the internet. Um, and also, Scientology says these sort of hyperbolic, over the top negative things about literally everyone who's ever left, including people who were born and raised in the organization and worked with L. Ron Hubbard. They'll
Yeah.
say these people were criminals the entire time. They were freeloaders. They were abusers. They were physically violent. They were psychotic. And you go, then why did he get promoted up the ranks again and again and again over a 40-year career to the highest levels of management? Like, how can you say that about someone that was one of you? Like, you see what I'm saying? So at
Mm.
some point, the criticism just becomes ineffective. At least that's how I feel.
What would you say to the suggestion that there's allegation after allegation after allegation after allegation, and of course, the central thread in all of this is you, and that you've just said, well, 95% of it isn't true.
Yeah,
To which someone might say, well, you're bound to say that because you're going to defend yourself. And of course,
true.
it's it's trite, but people say there's those three sides to the truth: your version, the other person's version, and somewhere in between. So if
Yeah.
someone were to adopt that approach, they would say, well, there's probably stuff in there which is true, and there's a lot of it. So at the end of the day, some of that does that not still stick against you, or does that not bother you?
I mean, it doesn't bother me. We're still talking about mainly the website, right?
Yes, the series of allegations that I side that there are numerous,
Yeah.
as you've just explained.
Yeah.
So
I mean,
somebody might look at it and go, For example, someone might say, yeah, I heard about this guy. He was alleged to have broken a window. Oh, well, there we are. But then with you, there's a whole catalogue of allegations against you. And the central thread of all of that is you. And so someone might be moved to suggest, Aaron, that you're the problem.
Well, sure, but someone who cared what Scientology said would feel that way. But if we approach it like as you said, there's one side, there's the other side, and then there's the truth. I'm totally comfortable with that. People are going to decide what the truth is for themselves. I can explain to someone what I think the truth is, and it's actually totally irrelevant. All that matters is what that person believes the truth is. And so I go, someone can make up their mind and feel however they want to feel about an individual. But for me, all that matters in my life is what I'm doing, what I'm trying to accomplish, who my friends are, how I treat people that are close to me, and how people that I don't know feel about me doesn't really have much to do with me or have much impact on my life. So, I mean, I guess we all have to wake up and look ourselves in the mirror each day. I don't care what Scientology says about me. If someone does read that website and has a thought about me, it just doesn't particularly have anything to do with me. So I'm not here to try and get people to like me. I'm here just to do the best job I can talking the truth about Scientology on the internet. So I sort of go, if someone watches my videos and they go, we like this video, we like this information, and so we're going to watch more of it, I go, good, then I accomplished my job. I don't, the stuff Scientology says just literally means nothing to me.
Okay.
And also there's another aspect of that, which is like, so I was practically born and raised in Scientology. I started working them full time when I was 12 years old. I joined the Sea Org when I was 22 years old. So, if all of these things that they say about me and us are true, then why did they continue to have us as members? Why did they continue to promote us up the ranks? And so it's like the more they criticize us, they're really more criticizing themselves, although they don't seem to truly be aware of it. And I think most of the world that sees what Scientology has to say about former members, they do see that. They say, wait a second, you're criticizing all these guys in the most horrible ways, but they were your most loyal, dedicated, energetic, and successful workers. So how can you now say they were all evil all of the time? What does that say about your organization? That's how I feel most people process the criticism that Scientology puts out there about its former staff members.
What about turning around and saying, given that you were in there from the age of 4, and some people may well have a degree of sympathy towards you as a consequence of the fact that you had no choice. You weren't recruited into this organization. You were essentially immersed into it without any choice whatsoever. What if you were to turn around and say, I'm simply a product of the environment that I was brought up in. I am a product of Scientology. I can't help the way that I am.
I mean, I think in a certain from a certain perspective, that would be a valid statement. It tends not to be how I feel. I just personally don't approach life from a perspective of using your past as an excuse for anything. But it is sort of ironic that that is what any former Scientologist could say in response to all of the lies and the criticisms that Scientology heaps their way. That's not anything I've said, because like I said, 95% of everything that Scientology accuses its former members of is completely false. But it is an interesting take on it. Like, if I am what you say I am, then that's what you made me. Because the truth is that would be the truth. Scientology claims that it has all of the tools to completely handle every source of evil in a human being or a being. And so, Scientology has the tools to handle anything. That's their shtick. And so, but that's also where they seem not to realize that by saying that these people who are born and raised in Scientology are these horrible, horrible people, you are either saying that that's what we made them, or we were unable to change them. And that would actually be them admitting a failure of Scientology, but they really don't care. They're kind of just single. L. Ron Hubbard said that critics are to be attacked and destroyed, and by any means necessary. And The Office of Special Affairs is the Department of Scientology that's responsible for attacking former members. They tend to be singularly focused on that without any regard for how it actually makes the organization look. And in my opinion, that singular focus on their part is actually largely responsible for the horrible reputation that Scientology has. I mean, when you think of Scientology, you think of a dangerous organization that tries to destroy critics and, you know, sue them out of existence and destroy them. Like, that's a reputation Scientology has created for itself just by virtue of how it goes after its former members.
Do you think that Scientology has impacted on you in any way that makes life difficult for you today? I don't mean their continued campaign against you, but in terms of your personality, the person that you are.
I do think, and I'm not sure I'm going to know the exact right words to use here, but there's something with my approach to relationships, a sort of a distance, that an automatic separation that exists between me and the other person, no matter how close I get to that person, that I can't help but feel comes from my Scientology experience, where you might call it, I don't know, intimacy problems, as far as really, really getting close to people, even the people who are closest to me. I feel like it's lazy for me to automatically say that's because of Scientology. How do I know it's not genetic? How do I know it's not something else? I don't know. But I can't help but feel like there's some Scientology cause for what I'm referring to.
And so you recognize that you have some, as you've described it, intimacy issues in your personal relationships.
Yeah, and realize I don't mean like, when I say intimacy, I don't mean like romantically, but
no, I understand. Interpersonal relationships, I understand.
Yes, and I'm very aware, and I even say this in my videos a lot. I very, very much struggle with showing appreciation and love, in a meaningful way. It's something I struggle with. And I've never known if it was specifically a Scientology thing or not. It's just so much of my life has been Scientology. I was taken out of school at 12. I don't have a high school diploma. I never went to college, but, you know, I've had a lot of exposure to the real world. You know, I've been, even though I was working full time for Scientology, I was also working in the real world just to make money to pay the bills. So, showing appreciation and gratitude and love is something I struggle with, and I just don't know what the right.
Can you give me an example of that? Give me an example of how you struggle with it.
I tend to compliment someone by complimenting something they did instead of complimenting them as a person. Like, you know, it's easier for me to go, "That's a job well done," than to say, "You're a great friend and you mean a lot to me." Like, I don't know that I've ever said that to anybody. You know?
Okay. Yeah, but you recognize the distinction.
I recognize the distinction, and I recognize that it makes me uncomfortable to show that sort of personal, or to express that sort of personal affection, even if I feel it. There's something about expressing it that makes me deeply uncomfortable. And I sort of assume that the other person will just know how I feel and I shouldn't have to say it. And I don't know why I feel that way.
Yeah. And you think that your upbringing in Scientology could have impacted on you in that way?
I very much do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's assume that that's right. Let's assume, and it's entirely conceivable. It's hardly a great leap of logic to suggest that the way that you've been brought up in a cult has now made you the man that you are today, and that it impacts upon your ability to have meaningful interpersonal relationships. How does that make you feel?
A bit sad, you know. I guess I'm somewhat fortunate that in many ways in my life I've been very, very successful. So I tend not to linger and dwell on negativity or negative things. But there is a sadness, there is a regret regarding this area of my life that we're talking about. But I don't sit here and dwell on it. But it's there. You know what I mean?
Hmm. I understand. Now, you mentioned earlier, and that some of your, and as you say, you're not dwelling on the negative, so let's focus on the positive. You described yourself as someone with determination, confidence, you're positive and you're proactive. Qualities one might suggest that you're meant for a different role to that which you have at the moment, and perhaps politics. Might that appeal to you?
Hell no. I actually did run for
No,
Clearwater City
no
Council a
interest in
couple years ago.
politics. How
No,
did you get on?
none
Were you
whatsoever.
successful? You didn't get anywhere.
I almost won, even though Scientology and the entire local political establishment were both firmly against me. I actually personally knocked on over 5,000 doors. I raised over $70,000, and I came very close to winning. But I'll never try that again. No. I think politics, it's a losing game. No, definitely not.
You mentioned earlier on some of your qualities, Aaron, about being strong in determination, confident, positive, proactive. All of those are qualities that one might suggest would lend themselves to perhaps an alternative vocation in life. How about politics?
Oh, definitely not. Although I did run for Clearwater City Council a couple years ago, and but then even that effort. Oh, by the way, I almost won. I knocked on 5,000 doors. I raised over $70,000 using my channel. Scientology was fighting me with everything they could muster. The local political establishment was fighting me with everything they could muster, and I still came in a close second. Um, but even then, I wasn't. I was running to try to prove that even the local people didn't have to be afraid of Scientology, and that's why I said I'm going to work as hard as I humanly can, because the stakes were high. But if I lose, I'll never try again. And so I, even that effort was an effort relating to Scientology. I don't think I have any role in the greater political sphere. No, definitely not.
Okay. Throw something out to you that's pretty expansive. What would you say is wrong with the world today?
Oh my goodness. I don't claim to be that enlightened to know the answer to that question. Well, I don't know. Let me begin by saying that I think the world is better off now than it's ever been, as opposed to how the media might make it seem. So, but if I were to seize on one thing of what's wrong with the world in general, just a lack of understanding of other points of view. That you don't have to hate the people who disagree with you, and I don't hate the people who disagree with me. I do hate people who try to destroy me, though. Which, I mean, look, it's only a few people, but I don't want someone to be a hypocrite, like, oh, you have to love thy enemy. No, I don't mind hating the enemy, but you shouldn't hate people just who have different views than you do. And I just think too much of the dialogue that I see online is people assigning negative intentions to others just because others believe a different way. And I don't know. These are cheap answers, because I don't claim to be enlightened enough to know the true answer, but that's my best shot.
That's fair enough. Thank you. In all of these conversations, the one thing I always wrap up with is a short game of something called This or That, where I give you a series of choices, and you can't decline, you can't say neither, and it's just to give you an opportunity to make that choice. And you can put it in whatever context you like in your head, but you don't expand on it. So you just give me the answer.
Okay.
All right?
Sure.
Okay.
I like it.
Here we go. Good. Fruit or veg?
Fruit.
Summer or winter?
Winter.
Text message or telephone call?
Telephone call.
Driver or passenger?
Oh, driver.
Sapphire or ruby?
I'm agnostic on that one, but I'll go sapphire.
Soft or hard?
Soft.
Dusk or dawn?
I didn't hear you.
Dusk or dawn?
Oh. Which one of those is the morning?
Dawn.
Dawn it is.
Okay. Unicorn or dragon?
Oh, we're going to have to go dragon on that one.
Fresh linen or fresh coffee?
Ooh, fresh linen.
James Bond or Jason Bourne?
James Bond.
Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings?
Harry Potter.
Jam or marmalade?
Jam.
Elf or dwarf?
Elf.
Flowers or trees?
Oh, I think trees.
Scarlett Johansson or Charlize Theron?
Oh, we're going Scarlett Johansson on that one.
Christian Bale or Hugh Jackman?
Oh, God, that's a good one. Christian Bale.
Top Gun or Fast and the Furious?
Top Gun.
Tall or short?
Tall.
Spring or fall?
Fall.
Wizard or warrior?
Warrior.
Mountain or beach?
Oh, yeah, we'll go with mountain.
Wasps or bees?
Bees.
Sparkling or still?
Sparkling always.
Frasier or Seinfeld?
Oh, my goodness. I'm going with Seinfeld.
Homer or Bart?
Homer.
Dogs or cats?
Oh, you know what? Oh, that is rough, but we'll go with cats.
North or south?
North.
Saturday or Sunday?
Saturday.
Book or film adaptation?
Film adaptation.
Star Trek or Star Wars?
Star Trek.
Coke or Pepsi?
Coke.
Just Stop Oil or Black Lives Matter?
Oh, my goodness. I guess between the two, we'll go Just Stop Oil.
No sense of smell or no sense of style?
I'll go no sense of style. Oh, wait. As far as which one we would rather have?